dreams is never quite as it seems, never quite as it seems. I know I felt like this before, but now I'm feeling it even more, because it came from you. Then I open up and see the person falling here is me, a different way to be. Oh. I want more, impossible to ignore, impossible to ignore. And they'll come true, impossible not to do, impossible not to do. And now I tell you openly, you have my heart, so don't hurt me.
Alineados a nuestra estrategia 2050.
Aligned with our strategy towards 2050 of having zero CO2 emissions, DHL Supply Mexico has decided to build in 100% electric vehicles to support distribution in Mexico City.
Esta estrategia
This
estará
strategy
soportando
will
nuestra
support
solución de
our
mall
solution of mall
para
logistics
entregas en centros
for
comerciales de
deliveries
la
in
ciudad.
malls
Muy
within
pronto
the
estarán
United
viéndolas.
Mexico City. You'll see them soon.
Buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon,
Bienvenidos de
everyone.
vuelta
Welcome
al
back to our DHL
Transportation
Transportation Forum
2021.
2021.
Mi nombre es Claudia
My name
Márquez
is
y
Claudia
soy gerente
Marquez,
senior
and I
del
am
equipo de
Senior
diseño de
Manager
soluciones de
of
DHL
Solution
Supply
Design
Chain
for
Mexico.
DHL
Me da mucho
Supply
gusto
Chain Mexico.
recibirlos de vuelta
Very
para
happy
nuestra
to have you
tercera
back
sesión
for
del día
the
de hoy.
third session of the day.
Hasta ahora la agenda del día nos ha
So far,
dejado con
today's
muchos
agenda
aprendizajes
has
e información
several
relevante.
learns.
No solo
We
han
have
sido
learned
los
several things,
ponentes, los
and not
videos,
only
inclusive
from the
las
videos and the
presentaciones,
speakers and the
sino también las
presentations,
ricas
but
discusiones
also
que se
the
han tenido.
very nourished discussions that
Por
we've
ello me
had.
gustaría recibir
That's why I
también
would
a
like
Sergio
to
Morales,
welcome
que
Sergio
también nos
Morales
acompaña en
once
esta
again,
sesión.
that will be with us today
Muchísimas
as well.
gracias, Clau. Muchas gracias.
Thank you dearly, Clau. Good afternoon, and it is a pleasure for me to be here with you. My name is Sergio Morales. I am the Director of Business Development in DHL Supply Chain. For those who are just joining us, let me share with you the event is being broadcasted in 3 different channels: Spanish, English, and Portuguese. Select the language by clicking on the preferred languages where you see it in your screen.
For our next panel, we will talk about one of the main challenges that we face, not only as an organization, but also as a society as a whole, sustainability. This challenge is so important that DHL has made it part of our business strategy. You will remember what Juan and Javier talked about yesterday about the fleet of electric vehicles, and we just saw a video about that. And adding to that, we have a target that more than 85% of our employees should be certified as Go Green specialists. We understand that we are part of the solution, and therefore we are sure that this panel will give us very valuable insight on how we can migrate to green transportation.
Yes, indeed, Clau. That's very important and such a relevant subject for us and for the world in general. So, allow me to introduce to you the participants of the panel. First of all, I would like to welcome Luisa Sierra, associated to the Climate Initiative Program of Mexico. She is responsible for the coordination of energy, and she has experience on mitigation of greenhouse gases, planning for the electric sector and road transportation, among others. She's an architect, and she has a master's degree in urban development planning by the University of College of London. She studied public policies in Washington Center and participated in the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas. During her graduate studies, she worked with the Development Bank, federal and local governments in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, to negotiate a fair compensation for unjustified sacking of local communities. Welcome, Lisa.
Welcome, Luisa, and I also have the pleasure to introduce Miguel Elizalde, who is an executive president of the producers, manufacturers of trucks in the National Society. He is also being the president of transportation and the La Concamin. He has also worked in the horizontal table of transportation while renegotiating TELEC. He got his graduate degree from Tecnológico de Monterrey as an industrial engineering and has a master's degree in public management in University in New York. Welcome.
Thank you for the invitation. Welcome, Miguel. And now I would like to introduce to you Rodolfo Hernandez. Rodolfo is the responsible of institutional relations and sustainability in Scania, Mexico. He is also the advisor in ANPAC. Rodolfo has collaborated in the Private Association of Transportation, working with governments on relative projects to safety on the road, with technical and logistic norms. In the governmental realm, he directed public policies in supply chain and for the Ministry of Economy since 2007 to 2015. It is an honor to be here. Thank you.
And from the team of DHL, we have Braulio Quijano, who is a senior manager of transportation in LED Sciences for DHL Supply Mexico. Welcome, Braulio.
And finally, I would like to introduce to you and help me welcome my friend Federico Nava, Director of Transportation in DHL Supply Mexico, who, alongside Braulio, will be moderating this session. Welcome. Thank you.
Well, before getting started, we remind you that during this session you will be able to send your questions in the chat that you have below your screen. Please use this space only for questions and write the word question so we can identify it better. With this, we are getting started with this panel, and I give the floor to Braulio.
Thank you, Claudia. Good afternoon, everyone, all the colleagues, all the audience. It is a pleasure for me to be in the panel surrounded by experts on logistics sustainability, who will be talking to us in a bit of a deeper level on how to transition to green transportation. How are you doing, Federico?
Hi, how are you doing? Yes, this will be a very interesting panel, as we have seen in previous sessions. Sustainability is a very important part for DHL. And we want to be in 250 to have no CO2 emissions, and we cannot manage that without having our partners with us.
Well, this is a huge commitment, and DHL Supply Chain, we have been preparing ourselves year after year, implementing innovative solutions to reduce emissions. We also support ourselves with state-of-the-art technology in order to make our operations more efficient and utilize our resources more intelligently, and hence utilizing our trucks better.
That's true, and I think it's also important to see what's the impact of these in the environment and the weather. So that's why I would like Luisa to tell us a little bit more about that.
With pleasure, Federico. Should I go ahead with my presentation then? Alright, good afternoon everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me here. It is a pleasure to share the panel with such distinguished members. I will tell you about the decarbonization of the low transportation sector. I have just a little time for the presentation. I will go over some scientific general facts and then give you a few measures that our colleagues will delve into later. So, in terms of decarbonization, what do we know about this today? Today, climate change is a very well-known subject all over the world. This is no casualty. It is rather the effort from many stakeholders and many resources being mobilized in order to position the subject in the climate agenda. As we know, we talk about climate change today. This is an emergency because we are living it today. This isn't something it's going to take place, it is something taking place. For a long time, it took us a while to acknowledge the fact that it is real, and most importantly, that it affects all regions in the world. Climate change, very generally speaking, is simply the variation of the weather persisting over sustained periods of time. This change could be caused naturally, but also due to different causes and human activities. Since the 19th century, the main cause for climate change is human activity, mainly fuel burning. There is a global agreement, I'm pretty sure you've heard of it, which is the Paris Agreement. This agreement says we need to limit the medium global temperature, the increase of the medium global temperature by 2 centigrades and continue to reduce it to 1.5 degrees. However, the last reports of the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, say and show that it is necessary to limit the increase to 1.5 centigrades. A few weeks ago, we had the last reports from the IPCC, and we have increased the temperature by 1.1 degrees Celsius. We forecast, should we continue with the same behavior and activities, we will achieve 1.5 degrees between 2030 and 2025. Many of you might be wondering, and how does this affect us? Well, the consequences are huge, and given the time I was given for the presentation, I cannot delve into it. However, it is expected to have an increase of frequency of heat waves and very intense rainfall. Most likely 2/3 of coasts, the sea level will increase by 20%, as well as significant increases in the frequency and intensity of heat waves and droughts. What do we mean by this? Before we had droughts like 10 years ago, every 10 years, now they will happen more frequently. There are some estimates that say that in the following 10 years will be every 2 years, and by all means, this is a key factor for fires as well. With this context, the question that most people ask us is, are we still on time to stop climate change? And the answer is yes. Yes, but we need to take action today. We cannot let it for later. We cannot just think about how to react. We need to take action today, and we need to start reducing greenhouse gases, most likely, like you've heard, CO2 or equivalent to CO2. Consistent and significant. I will talk about it further on. So where should we start? As you can see in the graph, we need to know where we are issuing the gases, where are the big sectors, and how we can start tackling it. Globally, we issue 49.9 billion tons of CO2 equivalent. The energy sector represents 73.2%. In this sector, the transportation sector occupies the third place. The third place with 16.2%. In this global context, it is different to the national one, and as a matter of fact, the transportation sector occupies a more relevant position. Nationwide, transportation sector is the second largest consumer of greenhouse gases, making up for 24%. In fact, for the highway sector of energy consumption inside the transportation sector represents almost 70%, and nationwide, this figure increases up to more than 90%. Taking action and taking measures to start reducing these emissions is absolutely paramount. If we were to talk about forecasts, should we continue with the current trend, emissions will continue to grow. In the graph you can see on your screen, you can see the green line. This is a forecast from 2020 to 2030. Should we assume none of the activities, well, let's say if we were to keep up with the same patterns of consumption. This graph is just for the transportation sector. We would go over 400 million tons of CO2 equivalent. In ICM, we have forecasted the carbon budget. What is the carbon budget? The carbon budget is precisely the amount of emissions we are allowed to issue, in order not to surpass the temperature by a certain degree. And what do I mean by this? If we want to limit the increase of temperature by 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees just for the transportation sector, and by the year 2050 we would have to reduce 81% and 92% of emissions for this sector. The challenge is mammoth, and as I said it before, we need to take action right now. I will tell you a few solutions for the highway sector and for last mile and urban logistics sector. I want to clarify that these solutions are not that far-fetched into the future. These are solutions that can be implemented today. That is the reason why I wanted to focus on it. We can name solutions for the middle or long term. However, since we are at a climate emergency, I thought it was relevant to place an emphasis on what we can do today. For road transportation, it is important, nationally speaking, to renew the vehicle fleet. In Mexico, the average age is 17.5 years of the vehicles. This is well above the other countries of the OCDE. Having a renewable program and handling of waste is key, not just for air and emissions. 85.7 is classified as man truck, and they concentrate 24% of the fleet, whereas 1% of the companies are cataloged as great transporters and have 30% of all the vehicle pool. The last ones usually have the financial power to renew the fleet. So renewal programs should be designed around man trucks at the center of the programs. I'm not saying the big transporters need to be destroyed. I am just saying we need to place them at the center of the programs in order to tackle the stakeholders. Another way to reduce emissions is a modal change. The modal change. What do I mean with the modal change? It is changing the way in which we move merchandises and payload around. In Mexico, 55% of the tons transported were moved by load transportation. These are values for 2019. Just 20.8% were moved on the railroad, and making a change in the modality, usually from roads to the railroad, is highly effective, since the transportation sector of the railroad is 5 times as efficient in energy terms than the road sector. It has been seen and estimated some cost reductions of price per ton, so implementing it would be extraordinary for the country. Of course, with this, we need to carry out an optimization of chain analysis in order to identify where and what sort of merchandise can be moved from the road sector to the railroad sector. Another measure, and this has to do with improvement of technological change. There are today hybrid vehicles that could be implemented now in electric terms, and especially for long distance payload transportation. There are some challenges that are still to be overcome. Hydrogen is increasingly a more feasible solution. Now I will talk about the last mile and why it is important to focus on the last mile. It is important to address it because generally it's the less efficient part, and it makes up to 20% approximately of the total cost to move merchandise. It is important to talk about the last mile in order to position it both in private and public debate, as well as in the concerns of the end user, because by 2050 we expect 68% of the population to live in cities, causing an increase in the demand for goods and services. It is expected for the demand in the last mile by 2030 to increase by 78%. In Mexico alone, between 2015 and 16, online sales increased by 28%. Out of the online buyers, 78% live in the cities. Satisfying this sector is key when it comes to emission, but especially when it comes to the quality of air, because we have impacts on the health of the population. So what can we do here? One of the measures that seems the most attractive, and generally speaking the implementation is good for, it is very likable for end users, is load bicycles, payload bicycles. They turn out to be quite effective actually. A study in London of a pilot study showed that emissions can be reduced by 50% and 40% in distribution costs. Of course, this needs to be accompanied by policies of use of land and consolidation center in urban consolidation centers. By the way, this is the third measure you can see here on screen. They are highly effective as well. Urban consolidation centers allow for the coordination between different brands. Of course, this represents yet another challenge, however a very necessary one, and a policy of land use. Technological change is identified as well, and unlike payload long-distance transportation, in the last mile electric vehicles are already an effective measure. As a matter of fact, we have companies such as Bimbo and others that are using this type of vehicles to deliver in cities their products. We need to see how we can accelerate such technological penetration. The last measure I want to communicate to you, it has been very effective and it's been implemented in Mexico in certain cities. I am talking about zone and time restriction. This allows for technological change, and what it does is you're not allowed to enter a certain area of the city with a certain type of vehicle, or the time of the day for loading is restricted, usually the historic center and high density areas of the city. I would like to finish my intervention by saying that climate change is real. If we don't want to suffer from such consequences that we are witnessing today, we must implement it and have coordination among several factors. We need to stop planning, and we need to stop thinking about how it will go down in the future. We need to identify what we can do today, how we can coordinate ourselves, and we need to increase will. I'm not just talking about political will, but also the will from companies in the public and private sectors and the citizens as well. It is highly important, it is very important to communicate the impact. It's uncomfortable, yes, but we need to act on it. It is a reality. Otherwise, by 2030, 2035, we will be paying very high costs. This is what I wanted to say today. Thank you.
Thank you for reminding us how important is this and the relevance of our actions of today, what we can do today to bring carbon emissions down. Thank you. And let's go with you, Miguel, please. If you could tell us like the trends in the market regarding the car manufacturing and truck manufacturing. Yes, of course. Thank you for inviting us. And We represent the National Society of Manufacturers of Trucks and Trailers. So first of all, I'd say that we have 14 partners, and we are producing a lot of models which are very high volume and capacity trucks, and the impact that these vehicles have in transportation is, let's say that it generates 2 million employments, and most of these are drivers of these trucks, and this represents a big part of the GDP. We are also automotive manufacturers, and Mexico represents in this sector only 1.9 million employees in manufacturing, and Mexico is the worldwide leader in exportation of freight trailers, number one globally. It's the fourth
de carga y décimo productor de los autobuses. Y esto lo logramos con la generación de 80,000 empleos, de los cuales 24,000 son directos. Ahora, somos esenciales, lo vemos desde la entrega de paquetería y mensajería por nuestros amigos de DHL, y somos esenciales porque también transportamos en estos vehículos el oxígeno, las medicinas, los alimentos. La industria mexicana fabricamos activos productivos.
Is creating assets, very important assets, and we are not just doing luxury stuff. So our products are vital, and the distribution of these have to go in a cargo,
de la carga
trailer.
terrestre.
85% of terrestrial freight is being carried out by us, and also a lot of people, students, are being transported daily in our buses. So that's the impact we have in everyday logistics. I'll share some slides with the numbers because it's very important to follow these figures. We needed to renew our vehicles for every vehicle that comes to the market, and for every car that is being substituted, you are reducing emissions and you are making an enhancement on public health. So considering last year, we have increased our figures, and very soon INEGI will show the figures for August, and we have seen an increase of 22.3% in retail, and that was far from our record year of 2007, which was 53,000, and it is far also from our goal, which is 168,000. And exportation, we are 38.7% better than last year. These numbers are on the car renovation in Mexico. We see the blue line, it represents 2020. We see a drop down during April and May. We were not considered essential, and most of our manufacturing plants were stopped. What happened? This pandemic stopped the vehicle renovation, and that has a mid-term and long-term effect, of course. And the yellow line, we see it's 2021, we got the levels back, but we are still far away from the pre-pandemic levels of 2018 and 2019. So it's very important to keep on following like the sales of new vehicles, because that's an indicator of how much we are reducing emissions. As an industry, we are working with 15 out of the 20 goals to reduce our carbon emissions, and we adhere to the global sustainable agenda, and we will keep on working with it by being in events like this, because we promote the renovation of vehicles, and in that way to enhance this environment. What technologies we have available to be able to bring our emissions down? We have diesel vehicles, that's the vast majority we have in Mexico, and we will also see a bigger participation of vehicles of sulfur and diesel, which reduce emissions of NOxes and other contaminants. We have synthetic fuels, we have also vehicles that work with gas, hybrid vehicles, hydrogen cell powered vehicles, and practically like a pilot program or working already, these 6 types of technology, we are seeing them in the streets in Mexico. Maybe not as much in the hydrogen cells, that's kind of a prototype so far, but sulfur-based fuels and electric and hybrid vehicles, those are part of the present. In this graph or slide, we try to see how will be this migration to green transportation in Mexico. If today we have like an average age of our fleet that's over 19 years old, we mean that for every new vehicle that is a 38 years replacement. So we will keep on seeing diesel vehicles because there's no a culture to renovate your fleet in Mexico. There's a culture of keep on using the vehicle, but we should do the other way around. Just to keep a profitable business but not possession over the vehicle, and maybe look for something to finance a new fleet, a newer fleet. So we'll see diesel vehicles for a couple of years more, but more biofuels will be put in the streets, also gas-powered vehicles, hybrid and electric vehicles. And I think that in some years to come, we'll see on the highways some hydrogen cells-powered vehicles. What do we need to promote this and to reduce these numbers that Luisa was telling us that we shouldn't exceed a certain level on global temperature? First of all, infrastructure on energy. On all of this, on diesel, also electric power plants for vehicles, and we need also places where to reload hydrogen. So all this infrastructure is fundamental. The technology is out there, we have it already, but the infrastructure will be one of the important keys. If you have infrastructure and you have the technology, there's something else in place: regulation and supervision. Let's remind that in Mexico, the big challenge is that out of the 140,000 companies, more than 80% of those are small and middle-sized business. Those have a hard time when trying to renew their fleet. They need more finance programs and incentives, green incentives. And these entrepreneurs maybe cannot replace a 38-year-old truck for a hybrid car, but the company that's selling that semi-new car can offer some greener alternative. We call this like a chained fleet renovation. If we have several companies, let's say that one of them destroys the obsolete vehicle, one buys the semi-new vehicle, and some other one buys the best technology out there. And we need, of course, to put incentives for this so they can buy greener vehicles. Let's not only talk about environmental terms, there will come some interaction. They were mentioning that e-commerce is growing. It's growing a lot. And in the future we will see much more automated like delivery methods like robots or drones for last mile delivery. So there's a big technological change coming next. It's not only the environment but also the logistics on this that will help the environment. So to wrap up here, I will take advantage. In 1 month we will have a virtual meeting of Expo Transporte, and from 4 to 8 of October, and you can visit our website autotransporte.com. We are very committed as a whole industry, car manufacturing, trailer manufacturing. We need to work in our energetic infrastructure, in financing, so we can achieve the substitution of our fleet. This industry is part of the solution, a very important part of it. We have invested a lot of resources, and not days or weeks, but years of work to get these technologies, which is top-tier technology. And we will hear from Rodolfo later on more about this, but we need to have an integrated solution: green incentives, financing, professionalism for little and middle business, and supervision, so we can thrive with the renovation of our fleets and keep on saving lives.
Thank you very much, Miguel. Very interesting data what you just presented. Hopefully we will make it for that presentation in a month. We will be visiting you there. After this, Miguel, would you give us your take on all these new technologies up and coming? And yeah, just tell us what is your take on this. Thank you. Can you hear me well? All right. Luisa and Miguel have already made it easier for me. They paved the way for me. And Miguel was saying it. The transportation sector is incredibly important. We saw a graph here about CO2 emissions produced in Mexico due to human activity, and of course, the activity with the highest production of CO2, with 35%, is the transportation sector. We have an enormous responsibility here. We are highly pollutant. At the same time, this is where an opportunity lies, because whatever we do will have a very important consequence, I would say. This is the transportation sector, construction, second is industrial sector. So, due to the increasing importance of the transportation subject, we need to translate all of this into robust sustainability strategies. Just to give you an example, what we have in Scania, beyond sustainable transportation, you talked about efficiency, in intelligent vehicles, collection, and whatnot, everything we've already talked about in this forum. There is also a line where we need to hold ourselves accountable. We don't talk about it much, but I would like to take the opportunity to emphasize on it. Beyond just environmental sustainability, there is also economic and social sustainability, and let us not lose sight on labor rights, health, diversity, inclusion. Of course, in Mexico, this is a highly relevant subject. Resources, when it comes to the decrease of the emissions in the company. Let's not forget about this. Now, when we talk about sustainable transportation and the transition towards a cleaner system and where there are more fuels, the system becomes more and more necessary. The one that you see here, there needs to be an interaction between the manufacturer, in this case Scania, the user of transportation, the people hiring the service, the company that will provide the vehicles, and here comes into play an incredibly important stakeholder for alternate fuels, the provider of infrastructure and energy. We're talking about natural gas. The latest developments in Mexico have been possible thanks to the fact that there might be a government interested in creating a transportation system based on natural gas. But the ones who will build the ducts and the ones who will provide you with the energy are a fundamental stakeholder in this business. If we talk about natural gas, if we talk about liquefied natural gas, electricity, everything will be the same. This player, this stakeholder will have many things to say in the ecosystem, and the whole of us together have to be working hand in hand for this type of projects. This is not just about the customer buying a vehicle and taking on the risks. There is a whole system intervening that needs to be aligned and aiming towards the transition to greener and cleaner transportation means. Let's place an emphasis on the energy matrix in Mexico. Everything we supply in the country, we see in darker green at the base how it has been, how the energy supply has been increased with carbon, which is not really good for the country. The second color there, diesel and petrol, have been kept up, and the supply has decreased, and the natural gas supply has increased. The third line from bottom to top. We are a country used to fossil fuels. 85% of the fuels we use comes from fossil fuels. And here's another piece of information. Renewable energies, they have been sustained, however, they haven't been developed greatly, at least not to the extent the country needs it. And if we were to talk about the transportation sector specifically, we see that 99.7% of the energy the transportation uses is based on petrol and diesel. We are completely tethered to diesel and petrol or gasoline, and it is important to take it into consideration because, as Miguel says, even by 2050, even when we have far-fetched cities from science fiction, we will have diesel vehicles. Cleaner for sure, yes. They will issue less particles, but they will be there with us. So let us not wait for a magical day in which all vehicles will turn electric and will not pollute anymore. Luisa said it better. This is simply not going to happen. I think we need to bet on it, and we need to do something, again, like Luisa said, today. We are becoming increasingly familiar with electrics, but now we're even talking about hydrogen. It is as if we are not even talking about the present. And I wanted to paraphrase Arthur Ashe, a tennis player. He said, in order to achieve excellence, start what you are with what you have and do what you can do. What do we have? We have, as Miguel already said it to you, the automotive industry in Mexico is quite strong and it has several options. And let me take this example. Working with what you have, we have diesel. Clean diesel is not available across the country, but there are some players that could have it. Maybe like an early adopter. This is a screenshot from Scania, where very important companies, they have the possibility to control the diesel that they use. They are taking a step forward in adopting the new diesel technology. I insist these will stay with us for a long time. Natural gas. 5 years ago we had a few service stations. Today we have around 55, 60 stations in the country, but they are there. This is a cheaper fuel than diesel. It reduces suspended particles by 90%, and it has a really good performance when it comes to reducing NOxes. It is a lot more silent than diesel, and it is there. It is a pretty good option that is already being used in the payload sector and the transportation sector overall. We have the opportunity now with LP gas. In Scania we have that option for the country. It is around the same characteristics as the gas, and it makes it more autonomous. It exists in the country and it is available. I would insist our natural gas vehicles also accept biogas. This has been explored just a little bit. This is due to public policies in the agro sector, because with the wholesale markets that we have, it could be an extraordinary source of biofuels. For transportation. We already have some experiences we have learned in Scania. And I don't have much time now. Evidently, electric vehicles What I want to insist on here, we will not have all sorts of electric vehicles in 5 years. This is a development that, as you can see in the graph, it's going in increments. It's going from 2020 to 2030. In a space of 10 years, we will start with urban vehicles, like the ones you can see, little delivery units, little passenger vehicles for public transportation systems. As the technology of batteries and the infrastructure is being developed, then we can start talking about more autonomous vehicles that can take on more passengers or take on more load. Then we will move on to vehicles that can move from city to city until more or less we think about 2030, when we will have large, heavy, with full capacity vehicles with a great degree of autonomy. This needs to be taken into account, because whereas we need to care about the urban environment, we still have some time to think about these intercity trips. There are many problems to solve: the weight of batteries, autonomy, large investments, but it will happen. In a period of 10 years, I think we will get quite a surprise. We will have some good news this year in Mexico when it comes to electric cars. Before finishing up, a piece of information here. Around 89% of electric energy produced in the country is carbon, diesel or natural gas based. That is to say, fossil fuels. Let's not joke about this. Just to wrap this up, this is an exercise carried out by Scania in Sweden. On the graph to the left, you see the whole CO2 footprint in the whole life cycle of the truck. You can see how a diesel vehicle, and the part you see in orange, this is the CO2 in the production of the vehicle. The lighter blue is CO2 produced for fuel until it gets to the petrol tank of the vehicle. And the little blue one is the one issued through the exhaust. This is what it will produce from the exhaust, and it is a lot. The next graph represents an electric vehicle, where in the production a lot more CO2 is created due to the manufacturing of batteries, which are polluting as well. And there is a significant CO2 percentage for energy production and taking it all the way to the city. But you see, in the life cycle through the exhaust, we don't really produce as much CO2. And according to the calculations here, there is a big opportunity of more or less 38% reduction opportunity. These numbers are not as exact. We are talking about more or less 32% comparing electric vehicles and diesel vehicles. However, if all of the electric energy created through fossil sources were produced instead of with wind energy, we would be talking about an 86%. The opportunity here is gigantic. And the point is, yes, we need to work with manufacturers, we need to work with customers and in infrastructure, but also governments, associations, all that, because the big effort to achieve 86% means everyone in the industry, the government, our customers are aligned. And finally, just as a closing remark, I'm sorry for taking more time than I was meant to. In Scania, a couple of years ago, we signed a commitment in science-based target. This is an initiative where you as a company say, I want to lower my CO2 emissions. You sign up, and with science-based methodologies, I get help to know how much CO2 I can reduce depending on my operations. And this is a commitment that you have to sign. You set it yourself, set it up for yourself, but I think this is very important. I just wanted to mention it. Scania made the commitment that 20% of emissions of the vehicles we will sell from here to 2020, the emissions will be reduced by 20%, and very quickly. The thing is, I think it is important to diversify the energy matrix, diversify fuels for different sectors, using some for urban areas, others for long distances. Diesel vehicles will stick around for a long time. There is a lot of potential, but let's not lose sight on how the electric energy is produced, and we need to offset it. I think all companies, from the smallest to the largest, we could carry out an exercise to see how much we issue and how much we can reduce these emissions. And that was it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rodolfo and Miguel, Luisa. Well, I loved your participations, and you showed this necessity that we have, that we needed to multiply our actions to reduce the carbon footprint. What do you think? Well, super interesting. As I said, we couldn't do this on our own. We need to do this all together. So thank you for the information. I think everything fell in line. That was great. And I think we have some questions to wrap this up. Yes, there are some questions from the audience.
The first question is, how prepared do you think the Mexican market is when it comes to adopting new fuels, new technologies for this decreasing climate change impact?
Well, I think that we are still behind in the Mexican market, and that we have some barriers here. I think it's important that we need to overcome these barriers, and this, when we talk with migrations, something key is planning, how we plan. And I think that we are lacking that nationally, like kind of strategic planning with several sectors that allow coordination between diverse actors. In this migration, we needed to plan, and something key in order to do that, to go to another system, is to identify what technologies will be the better bet, and the better bet will be found by evaluating this in several factors, not only environmental but also economic and social factors. So identifying what technologies we should support to increase this penetration in this field is key, because we're talking about like little sector technologies, right, which are not very developed. So in order for them to go to the bigger picture, when they are in the bigger picture, they like stand still for a long period of time. We see that with fossil fuels now. And I think it's important to plan, and that we are lacking that. We have a barrier in that matter. And something else that we should do is to invest in science and technology. I think we're falling behind, and same thing for innovation and transition. I think it's key to say you have two options, whether you are after the wave or before the wave. So if you are after the wave, it will knock you down. So it just to put it in a very informal way, but we need to invest in innovation, need to invest in science and technology, and develop different schemes to bring these technologies to the Mexican context. Other barrier I find to talk about the systems is the lack of economic instruments, and mainly we can like put a price on carbon. I think that should be like something, I know it's polemic, but it might be a great leap forward to make them pay for their carbon print.
I just wanted to compliment what Lisa said. I would say that in Mexico there's a thing. We could have the technology, and we have it. The infrastructure that I talked about, and even if we had the infrastructure, the main challenge lies in renewing vehicle parks from the micro and medium entrepreneurs. They have the oldest fleets and the least efficient, so we have to focus on if they cannot take the leap into a new vehicle, perhaps a cleaner than the one they have. This is the most pollutant and unsafe fleet, helping the micro and the small business renew their fleet to become more competitive, and when becoming more competitive they will be able to renew their vehicles without having a direct incentive perhaps.
I would only add that there's a very important base that regards conscientization, awareness. Sometimes we think these changes need to go with laws and with the technological changes, but if we raise awareness that maybe Tabasco can be flooded and people cannot live there anymore, or we can get to 50 degrees in Merida in a couple of years, I think that we should raise awareness with that. And in the other hand, I think big companies, and I don't mean like super transnational companies, but big companies, I think they have some awareness about climate change, and that is filtering down to all the public, to its suppliers, and renew like this step by step going down the chain. I think that would be a good wedge to go into this.
Have you talked about strategic planning and several other alternatives to the fuels that we have already, but there is always this question about if we have alternate fuels, and if we were to take into consideration the geography and orography of Mexico, it is not the same to have a short trip and a long trip. What should we need to do in order to make that change?
Well, I'll repeat my previous participation, but infrastructure, that's key, because maybe 10, 15 years ago, if you wanted to have a gas vehicle, maybe the power the engine will give you wasn't that much. But technology has moved on so much that technology is good enough to go up like very steep roads, and maybe before we were not considering like the height that Mexico City is, but we're considering that now, and technology is not a limitant anymore. I think it is infrastructure. That infrastructure needs to be out there to have like diesel infrastructure, gas infrastructure all throughout the country, and not many years from now also an hydrogen infrastructure and electricity for your vehicles, that you can go like to a gas station for electricity.
I would just complement it with the other perspective of the end user. This isn't something we mentioned much, but in order to make it happen and to accelerate transition, creating a demand is absolutely paramount, and this is the responsibility of the end user to go for companies that use these technologies, that give them the deliveries with low emissions. I think the responsibility of the user needs to be communicated. They need to hold themselves accountable in order to demand, rather than just demand, preferring. In that way the demand is created on itself, and on the other side of the chain you need to go for it, otherwise users will not go for you anymore. That's what I wanted to complement with.
So you think that we need to have a complete infrastructure and that wouldn't affect the Mexican culture? Like, well, my truck is working, I have no reason to replace it?
Like Miguel said, the transportation sector, it's always been my perception that it's been quite traditional. Like, this was my grandfather's truck or whatever. But what I have seen is that 100% companies, family owned, are betting on technological changes. This is not just a matter of fuels. Once they see the vehicle connected and see they can know where it is, if it is being well operated, if the operator has good driving habits due to all the sensors we have. I think this is a market This is a market that is not that traditional anymore. It is becoming quite innovative. And I would add on top of that, that if we want to climb a hill with electric vehicles right now, it will not support it. But with liquefied gas or natural gas, diesel, no problem. I think it is becoming more and more dynamic. The complexity here is that many more stakeholders have to be aligned.
I'd also add, in one of my slides, I said that we will have a great variety of technologies, not only hydrogen, electricity, gas, we have plenty more. So you will decide as a consumer, these are commercial vehicles, let's remember, these are used to do business. If your vehicle is not profitable, like considering versus another one, you will lose the business, and so you have to be competitive for users, and of course what the consumers demand. But if it is not like profitable in its usage, we will find the use of another technology to go up a hill, as we said, or maybe if you go to the desert you will find another technology, or at sea level. So every route will be different, and I think we should like localize the best technology for each of the country's roads.
And in order to start wrapping up with this panel, because we are running out of time, we have many things there, the elements are out there. It is now our responsibility to utilize them and implement it. In DHL Supply Chain, we are proud of our business partners, both customers and transportation lines that are highly committed to sustainability, and we keep on working towards that goal.
That's excellent. I think it was a super interesting panel, and once again, our line together, unstoppable. I think we're showing that here.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Right. Thank you very much, Luisa, Miguel, Rodolfo, for such an interesting talk. Braulio and Federico, thank you for moderating it with such dexterity. We would also like to thank you for staying here and discover how to transition to a greener transportation. You will be getting a survey to your email, or the one you used to sign in. Please help us answer it and share your comments so we may consider your suggestions for further editions.
Once again, we invite you to keep on sharing on your social media this experience, whether with messages, photos of the event, and comments. All opinions are welcomed. We remind you to add the hashtag DHLTF2021 in your posts so we can keep on with the conversation and share them worldwide.
Upcoming now, we will have a 2-hour break in our broadcast. We will see you back at 3 p.m. Mexico City Central Time for our session guaranteeing a safe, low transportation, where we will have experts on security. Don't miss out on it.
I'm sorry for the things I've done.